of Green Spring. Let me correct that introduction. It's memoir class with two of our authors. I'm Fran Duvall. I'm your host for today, and today is, what's today? Wednesday, September 13th, 2017. So let's get right to it. We have here two Marcias. We have Marcia Aberly and we have Marcia Boyles. And they are two of our authors here in the village. We have lots of authors.
We do.
Yes, we do.
Absolutely, we do.
A very full author shelf.
Well, welcome to both of you. Is your book on the shelf?
They certainly will be there.
Okay. Maybe for people who don't know, there is a shelf in the library, the main library, that's just for authors who live here. And so you'll find this one eventually. Well, welcome to both of you. And who's going to start? Marcia, are you going to start?
I will start this morning, Fran.
What prompted you to write this book?
Well, what a good question. What prompted it was the fact that we have an actual memoir class here at Green Spring, which I teach, and it's been going now for almost 8 years. Mm-hmm. And in this class, and Marcia Aberly, who is in the class, will talk more specifically about the class itself, but we have such wonderful memoirs that people have been writing, and it occurred to me that it would make a wonderful novel to take fictional memoirs and reveal characters in the novel by their written memoirs. So that's the premise of this book. This book is what I would consider to be a twofer. It is a mystery novel set in a retirement community, which is remarkably like Green Spring. In addition to that, it is a primer on how to write your own memoirs. Mm-hmm. Clearly, many people here at Green Spring, and I'm sure in other retirement communities as well, are interested in writing their memoirs. So this will give you really some direction and directions on how you might start writing your memoirs, because it does center on a memoir class. And in the memoir class are 6 fictional women, and I stress fictional. These are not based on real characters. 6 fictional women with very often very interesting pasts, and they write write their memoirs. Now let me just run through the list of characters very quickly. My favorite character is a woman by the name of Orally Cummins, and honey, she is so Southern. She writes about her Confederate kin, of whom she is extremely proud, and begins to realize in the book that she is maybe under a few illusions about some of those good Confederate kin. The second character that I very much like is Lisette Bouchon. Lisette is a former New Orleans socialite, and she has a husband with whom she is somewhat estranged and has had a series of affairs all of her life. But she's reached the age, now that she's in her late 70s, when she believes that maybe she ought to switch from affairs to investments. The third character is Myra, who is the daughter of Hispanic migrant workers. And she is in a wheelchair. She is assaulted viciously during the course of the book. The fourth character is Naomi Herbst, who is a wonderful Jewish musician with an interesting past. And the last character is Pam Brownlee, who is a British expatriate. So these are the characters, and the novel is based on the fact that as these characters are writing their memoirs, they're getting, all of them in their cubbies, are getting a series of very threatening, very nasty, very scary notes. So the mystery then becomes who is sending these notes and why, and what is going to happen to the characters in the book, because they're all, these notes are suggesting that they're going to be murdered. So that's the basis of it. Marcia, you might want to talk a little bit about our actual memoir class, since the dynamics in the book about it.
Let me interrupt a minute and say, when I read the book, you say they're fictional and all this. I'm reading it, and each of those characters or their memoir, and I'm going, oh yeah, that would be so and so. You know, I'm putting people into those that I know here. You know, I don't know if they're even in your class, but anyway, go ahead, Marcia.
Well, you know, actually, if I might just interrupt 1 second, the character I forgot that I guess, frankly, is sort of me-ish is Cam McCrae, and she is a former academic scientist,
Yeah.
also with a kind of interesting past. So, forgot all about her.
It's,
I thought I only counted 5.
well, actually, Connie is another one.
But she's not in the class.
Excuse me?
She's not in the
No,
class.
but she joins in, and part of her experiences are just charming to read about, and she flows into the other characters in a very nice way. She's a pole of steadfastness who can be depended upon. The memoir class was really terrific. And one of the things that I love to emphasize is the fact that many of us who came to it had written before, but we didn't have the sense of craftsmanship that a memoir is supposed to have. And for instance, here is the perfect example. One of the pieces that I had written, when I read it, Marcia said to me, well, where's the punch? A memoir, unlike just a commentary, has to have a punch at the end. And I had never thought about it, because what I wrote for myself I called reflections, the kind of thing we sit around and we jot a few notes and we mull over, you know, from our history and our current experiences. So that was a very sharp learning experience. It was wonderful because it helped all of us focus in on the level of intimacy that we shared, the level of trust that we shared, and that was one of the nicest things about the class. Whatever was shared in class stayed there. Stayed there permanently. It's been years since we've started writing together, and nothing has ever been discussed outside of the room. So the sense of companionship, and I really want to urge people to think about this, because when you move into a new community at our age, you have a history. Some people choose to share that history. Some people choose to renew their lives, find other paths, reinvent themselves. And so we had the opportunity to float between the reinvention, fictionalizing fun experiences and other experiences, and allowing some of our innermost subjective emotions to creep through into not only our memoirs for the class, but also our characters later on. It was a wonderful experience. And when Marcia came up with the idea of writing a mystery, I thought, oh my gosh, this is going to be either a ball or disaster. And it turned out to be an absolute ball over a period of 4 years. Yeah, allowing for time out to talk. Oh, we spent hours talking about the characters and where we were going and the levels of mystery that we wanted to share. The sexual exploits of older women. This is very much a community of very comfortable, well-educated, interesting women who find themselves in a position that they never thought they'd be in. So the class was invaluable in sharpening and focusing our skills. Marcia's very good at that.
Yeah, when I read the book, my first impulse was to think of it as a primer to how to run a class, how to teach somebody to write a memoir. Was my first instinct when I first read, the first few, maybe 50 pages or whatever. That's what I was thinking about, and I think it has a valuable asset right there, just in knowing how to formulate and see examples of how people wrote their memoirs.
And you got exactly what we were trying to accomplish with that book. Yeah, I think what Marcia is saying is, and nicely put, Marcia, I have to say, was that a memoir is a story with a point. And so many people, I think probably confuse autobiography with memoir. Memoir is a story, and an autobiography is just a compilation of facts normally. You know, my parents were born in Sioux City, Iowa in 1920, whatever. Whereas a memoir is a story about incidents, and it demonstrates really humanness. I think it can demonstrate hubris or humor or anger, or there could be a moral to the story or whatever. But it is a story with a point, and that's what Marcia was pointing out here. And also, as you said, Marcia, the whole issue of confidentiality that people agreed to, those were part of the ground rules.
That's right.
And
So we won't get to hear all the real juicy stuff, is what you're saying.
well, the juicy stuff is in the book, but we don't talk about the juicy stuff from our memoir class. that's sorry about that, Fran.
So obviously you had, I don't know how many years it took you to write it, but
It took
About
3 or
4.
4.
there's a process that has to go. And I mean, like, okay, you're going to write a book. So are you thinking about getting this book published? Do you think in your head, or is it just something we're going to write for us or whatever? So you had to find out all that detail before you got started.
I have
didn't you?
published, I have several book publications, but they're nonfiction. And I have been writing fiction for a long time, so this was not totally uncharacteristic of some of the things I've been doing in the past.
By the way, everybody sees the book sitting here. It's the cover, anyway, is here.
Yeah.
In case you ever want to find it over there in the library.
Well, it's in the library, and Fran, I think the screen also will show the fact that it's available from Amazon, both, there it is.
Oh, yeah.
Both as an ebook for your Kindle and as a paperback, and that's in this form. So all you need to do is go on Amazon and check it out.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I'd like to say something about the time quality. To go ahead and say we want to produce something, someone has to be very focused. The focused one between us was Marcia. I was ill here and there, and she kept getting back to it and pushing it and saying, this is so good, let's not drop it, let's keep up the work. And so she gets all kinds of caveats and praise for her energy. It takes a lot of energy, particularly for people at our age. It does not come that smoothly. And as we wrote and rewrote and talked about the characters and decided how much of what should be in and how much was irrelevant, and then the terribly difficult task of putting it all together, weaving people's memoirs into a unit of the story.
Is the narrative.
That narrative is extremely troublesome.
Well, did you get feedback along the way from
We did.
other people?
We
in the
had
class,
some.
or-
We gave a number of the chapters to our memoir class,
Oh, okay.
and they critiqued them. And so, yes, it was a very collaborative project. I mean, I think that's one of the things that was kind of unique about this book. Not only is the setting and the fact that the characters are revealed through their memoirs, but it was so collaborative with Green Spring people in a Green Spring class. So this is, I feel like this is very much a Green Spring book, in the very best sense of the word. And I will also say, amazingly enough, I don't think we ever had a crossword with each other about this. I mean, you would think, I've collaborated in other projects, and sometimes but we never had any huge disagreements about it, or with the class.
First of all, let me just say, I know both these ladies. They are both so strong that they would end up killing each other if they got into a battle. So I could see that you could work well together, because you are both tough.
Well, either we'd work well together, or we would absolutely kill each other. I mean,
right.
Nothing in between. I would agree with you, Fran.
Well, one of the nice things is that in a metaphysical sense, we share a lot of thoughts. So that overrode some of the picky stuff that might have really distressed a different relationship. We were able to override that very nicely. We also had great respect for each other's characters. And that's essential in working together with another person. I had never written collaboratively, and I had never written fiction. I've only done professional work, which was a completely different task, of course, in communication. So this was a novel experience, and one of the things—
No pun intended.
No pun. And one of the things, the aspects that was so lovely was, and this is due again to the atmosphere in the memoir class itself, is that the different layers and perspectives you feel free to put into a character are exciting. Because as human beings, with all of our sensitivities, we don't always allow ourselves the grace to be kind to ourselves. We could be kind to our characters in a different way. And that was a very lovely aspect to discover.
That was nicely put, Marcia. I would never have thought about it quite that way. But it's true that the characters grew. I mean, there was a lot of reinvention, which we know is kind of classic, I think, for many folks here at Green Spring.
Well, the fact of the matter is, if we're writing a memoir and we're doing it ourselves, who's around to say it wasn't true?
Precisely.
I remember Virginia Scott, dear, dear soul, who was in a class I was in, a memory class in the evening. And she was writing this story about her family. And I said to her, now, Virginia, did all that really happen? And she said, well, honey, who's around to say it didn't? You know?
Yeah, exactly.
So,
Exactly.
that's one of the liberties, I guess I want to say. You have a liberty to things don't have to be absolutely factual. Maybe you would write something about yourself that you wish it had happened this way, or you wished you had learned that from that experience.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
That is the joy of fiction.
Yeah.
Where you can just let yourself go free in that mind, even though you haven't experienced it in real life.
Yeah.
So one of the fun things was, as topics came up in the memoir class, at first Marcia assigned them so that we had a commonality to share.
Like, for instance,
For
name
instance,
a topic.
picnics.
Write a piece about a picnic.
Write about a family relative that you admired.
I see.
Modeled yourself after, perhaps. One of my interesting characters wrote about a family picnic. And when I sent the book out to my brother and my cousins and all the rest, those left of my generation, I got calls saying, oh, Marcia, I could taste the coal. I could taste this, I could taste that. I could feel us and see us. And that was so reaffirming and enriching to know that the common chord of our memories, not just my memories about a specific incident, but our memories were solidified for us to share. It's a very enlarging aspect to using some of the reality here and there.
Right.
One of the things that as I remember, we put into the book, and certainly happens in our memoir class, is that people will say, you know, I showed this memoir that I just wrote to my sister or my brother, and they have totally different recollections.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I have a tendency to write things that my sister swears happened to her, not to me, and it just bothers her terribly. How could you say that, Marcia? Yeah, that didn't happen to you. One of the comments that I remember, one of the members of our memoir class said she had 4 brothers and sisters. There were 5 siblings, and she said, after we tell stories about our childhood, she said, we all say to each other, I don't think we grew up in the same family. Everybody's memories and recollections are totally different,
exactly.
and sometimes quite contrary.
Well, and if there's a span of time between ages, like I was,
Yes.
there was a large area between.
You had 4 siblings, didn't you?
Oh, honey, I had 7 siblings.
7 siblings.
But anyhow,
Right.
but I will say things, and they will they don't even know what I'm talking about. Because
You were the youngest.
I was the youngest, yeah. But and also I think I saw things differently than they. I think I perceived what was happening differently.
You were probably an observer to
Maybe.
a larger extent as the youngest.
Well, that's probably true. I mostly know I was spoiled, but anyway.
Indulged.
Indulged, yes. That's a better way than spoiled.
I think it is. It's a little
Yeah.
less pejorative.
All right, so you decide, okay, you get the book written, and do you find a publisher before you write it, or?
Well, thank you for asking that question, because that was a couple of years really delay in our getting it published. And I think there are some interesting aspects to this, and let me just tell you briefly. Because I have done a lot of writing and have always, had fairly mainstream publishers, that was my immediate thought, that of course we'll get a mainstream publisher. And in order to do this in this day and age, you don't go directly to the publisher anymore. You have to go through an agent. I mean, you have to go through an agent. It used to be an option, but now you have to. So then the objective was, let's find an agent. Well, there are books of agents, and in many cases they'll indicate their specialties and so forth and so on. So you go through this list of hundreds of agents, and you can now, at least it's easy, you don't have to use the U.S. mail, you simply attach your manuscript to an email. So at least that part's easy. And there has to be a cover letter that is, tries to attract their attention, da-da-da-da-da-da. Well, we got, I think I sent out something like 130 inquiries to agents. And of those 130, I personally heard back from, I think, about 7. And that actually was quite good.
They didn't want your business.
Well,
They didn't know what they were missing.
of course not. Or maybe they did. Anyway, actually 7 was excellent. To get any kind of a personal reply is considered a real big deal. So at any rate, what several of them said was, this looks really interesting. However, they said 2 things. However, the publishing world is just absolutely up for grabs right now. With ebooks, and I mean, books are becoming passé, let's face it. So with ebooks, we don't quite know, the publishing world doesn't quite know where all this is headed. Amazon doing its own publishing, and. And the second thing they said, which absolutely shocked me, was the fact that because the second thing they said was that most publishing companies do not purchase books for our demographic. And so they're less interested in books about seniors than they would be about younger people. Now, the thing that makes this so odd, Fran, is the fact that our demographic, people over 60, buy something between 70 and 80% of the books.
We're the ones that read and buy the
That's
books.
right.
Exactly. And we've got more leisure time, and we're buying them as books,
Yeah.
not always on our Nooks or Kindles.
Our e-readers, yeah.
Our e-readers. So it was surprising that while we're the largest demographic who reads, they're not interested in topics that are most relevant to us. So those were the lessons that I learned from the agents. And finally, we did have one agent who was willing to represent us. And it sat on his desk or in his computer for 3 months. And at the end of 3 months, I wrote him and said, are you going to do something with this book? And he wrote me back and said, I'm really sorry, but I haven't even had a chance to read it yet. And I thought, well, after 3 months, so I said, we'll move on. He said,
thanks, but no thanks.
thanks, but no thanks. So we could have had one, at least.
Well,
So-
wouldn't that cost more money than, You have to pay an agent, right? I mean,
Well, they take a
how do they get?
They take their cut, of course.
They take
Oh, okay, a
15 or
percentage. Oh, okay.
20% of the
Okay.
royalties.
All right.
And that's why they pick a book that they think will sell, because
Sure, they're going to get more money. Yeah.
exactly right.
Makes sense.
Exactly. Exactly right. And they have direct contact with the publishers. So if you can get an agent, you can probably get a mainstream publisher. So that's the way that world works.
But people can self-publish and go on Amazon or someplace, and I don't know how you do that, but there is a way to do that, and that's what you all did, right?
We did.
Well, the first thing you need is a terrific computer person.
Yeah.
And neither of us were really that.
Well, let me, and before we get into
Yeah,
what
'cause
Marcia's
we need
referring
to,
to
move along here.
is the fact that Amazon quite recently has started publishing both ebooks and paperbacks. This is just the last, I think, 6
And this
or-
came out in July, right?
This came out
Yeah.
just, that's right.
2 months ago,
2 months ago. So they're doing both paperback and ebooks. Yes, and as Marcia is saying, neither one of us could have possibly managed to get this on Amazon. I mean, you have to format it yourself. You have to have the cover design, the spine design, the back design, all the pictures. So it was
Well, it's a nice
terrific
cover.
job.
It's the cover.
Verna Findley and Carol Subic were the combined.
Oh, how nice. And Verna's not with us anymore. but
Exactly.
Carol Subic certainly is.
Yes, and Verna came up with the idea, and Carol did clip art with it.
She is a computer.
She is a
Yes, she's
terrific
wonderful.
She's
performer.
a very good computer person.
Unbelievable patience and energy and kindness.
Yeah.
Someone else might have thrown their hands up and said, forget it, go elsewhere.
Or thrown the manuscript in the
Back up, right.
Yes.
But she was
Well, look, you know
terrific.
what happened, don't you? That I'm getting some signals here that we have about a minute left. So
Oh my
Good heavens.
goodness.
My
the time
goodness,
has
this went
gone
fast.
like that. So give us a 1-minute summation here that you might want to say. I mean, what do you?
Have fun.
Okay.
Look into yourself and have fun and share. We're at a great point in life. We have a lot to share.
Okay, it is true, we do. It's sad we find out about people and all their goodness after
Too
they've
late.
gone. Yeah, this is great. Are you starting a new class, Marcia?
Yes, a new class has been going about 6 months.
Oh, okay. All right. So I know your classes are always small, so.
Yes, and they're closed.
Yeah.
But we will be starting another one probably in about 3 or 4 months.
Okay. All right,
Thank
thank
you.
you both for coming, and I
Oh.
hope this was a fun time for our audience today.